What's going on, everybody? This is SCL0320. I'm back at it again. This time around, this is going to be a collaboration of SCL0320's channel and Super SCL0320. I'm going to feature this video on both of my channels simultaneously because it's very distinct. Specifically, it's all about the Man of Steel. So far on my SCL0320 site, I've done a video specifically on a non-spoiler review of Man of Steel, a two-part heavily spoiler-filled review of Man of Steel. This time around, this is totally different. This is totally outside the box, and dare I say, very hard to actually go and try to conquer and tackle. Because what I'm going to do, and I'm going to take and dissect different aspects of the Man of Steel and the written word, King James NLT, the Word of God, Bible. So before I get into this, this is just being specific before I get to any points. I'm not trying to make any comparisons between Superman and Jesus Christ. I'm not trying to make any comparisons between Superman, like the man, the fictional person, and him supposedly solidifying some kind of God. That's not what this review is about. It's really all about specifically key points in the Man of Steel and other aspects of the different hero generation that have shown there's something different what they've actually specifically designed for the Man of Steel, Superman, through the ages. Not just in this movie, but it's explored in this movie in so many different ways. So what I'll do is I'll talk about the different points, and then I'll go into the history behind it. Okay, so off the gate, I talked about how with Superman, in the beginning of the movie, you have Jor-El, Laura, they have the child, they conceive, they have young Kal-El, they name him Kal-El. Okay, whether y'all know it or not, but the name actual Kal-El in Hebrew actually means voice of God. So you think to yourself, okay, why would whoever the creator of Superman named this person to that name? Actually, the two writers of Superman, which let me give you 1 second, I'll give you both of the names. Okay. Jerry Siegel, of course, I know his name. And then the other one is Joe Shuster. Both of these gentlemen are Jewish, born in different locations specifically, but when they actually came up with the character Superman, they were actually going to make him a villain, which is very ironic. But when the oppression of Hitler was actually going through in the 1933, they actually were like, well, we want something to be a beacon of hope, that nothing that was corruptible, but something that was stood for good, you know. And then they named him Kal-El, which in Hebrew, like I said, means man of God, which is so crazy because the House of El, which is Jor-El, Laura, Kara, Zor-El, their actual in Hebrew, El means of God, which is very interesting. I'm not sure if anybody knew that or not. I explored a little bit of this here, but that was really interesting. I thought about that. But going through the actual timetable, what happens with Kal-El? Okay, so Jor-El goes through and he tries his best to protect his son. He knows without a shadow of a doubt his son has to go. And he has to go beyond what he thinks he has to be or do, that he has an option. Okay, he's the first conceived birth in centuries. Okay, so from that standpoint, there's not just a lot written on him, but there's a way that he can actually preserve his race through the seed of Kal-El. And what ends up happening is the actual artifact or the relic that they would use to actually make these clone copies of different individuals through different birth lines, giving them a set reason and purpose to live. But each person, he wanted to actually have his son be a conduit to exploring whatever he desired. Like, what if a child actually desired to be more than what society entitled him to actually be, you know? And that's what he wanted for his son. That's what he wanted for his actual race. And so it was like when this was going on, Zai was doing a Q, and he was trying to actually raid and figure out why was all this happening and the council weren't doing anything, he was a patriot. He was trying to protect his race, so he wanted to get the relic so he could take it somewhere and re-solidify Krypton in a different kind of fashion. And Jor-El knew that he was going to actually do it in such a terrible way that he was like, no, this can't stand. So he took the relic, he embedded it into Clark's DNA and his blood. And so it's like Clark has in him, like coursing through his veins, the DNA of his whole entire line, entire people. And it's so interesting because I'm not sure if anybody knows, but if you go through like the Bible, when you go through Abraham, when you go through David, when you go through Jacob, you go through Joseph, and it goes all the way down the line to Joseph, and it goes to next with going through the conceiving through Mary of Jesus. It's all about like specific with the bloodline. And it's interesting how they did that with this movie, that they've never really explored that. Like, okay, what's so real special about this one kid? Okay, you save him, you know. But then you think back to like in the Bible when they talk about Moses. When Moses was going through his situation, when he was born, his mother birthed him with Aaron and his sister. They were killing all the firstborn children. Pharaoh was upset, and he wanted to kill all the firstborn children because he felt as though they would be a threat. And so Moses was supposed to die, but with faith, his mother decided that the best thing that she could do, even though she didn't know how it was going to happen or what was going to happen, she knew that God was going to protect him. He was going to keep him safe. So she threw him down the water, and he went down the stream. And ironically, the Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses, and in turn, the Pharaoh's wife holds Moses and holds him as her son. And so he was raised in the palace in Egypt. Far be it for him to realize that he has a destiny far greater than his own. This directly parallels Superman. And it's shown so eloquently in The Man of Steel through the performance of how Russell Crowe exemplifies, okay, the importance behind this, but then his mother is like, okay, I don't want to do this. I thought I could do this, but this is my son. But then at a certain point, even after Jor-El is killed, and he is killed at a certain point by Zod in the midst of a fight, which is really epic because Clark is being pushed right out, and he takes his eyes off for a second. Zod kills him, and before he does this, he said to Laura, he's like, look, the fate of this race is resting with that child. Do not send him out. Like, please, I beg you, don't do that. She thinks to herself, but then she knows without a shadow of doubt that there's so much more greater things that are yet to come for this child by him going, not just for his safety, but for the people. And Zod couldn't see that. He only saw just a one-sided kind of way with it. But it's so interesting that with parallel, like I said, with Moses, it wasn't just a simple fact of him being pushed out like he was when he was younger, but his destiny that he didn't know at a certain point when he realized that he was a slave, that he wasn't supposed to be born in the palace, that he was supposed to be born into slavery, and he defended somebody and he killed a guard. He went into exile, and when he went into exile, he went and met his future wife and a place of peace. He was very just comfortable, you know. And it brought him to this place where he had to get outside his comfort zone and go back and go and save his people. But it was like, you think about Clark went to this point where he got back. Of course, they do this through revealed flashbacks in The Man of Steel. But it's very interesting because you see where Clark, he's always battling, wrestling with his destiny and his purpose. But for the most part, he really just wanted to be human. He did not want to be considered an alien. He even told his dad, he was like, can I not just pretend to be your son? And Kevin Costner does such an amazing line. He says, you are my son. And it shows how much that he wants to be a part. He doesn't want to be different. He doesn't want to have this burden on his back, even though he knows that at some point it has to be fulfilled. Like, it's going to happen. But the man that he's supposed to be is being driven by the things that he's going through. And kind of like Moses, even though he was born in the palace, he killed somebody, went into exile, he went into this place of just complacency and fun. He went at a certain point, found the burning bush where he was able to speak for the first time with his true father, Father God. And through that, it shook him out of empathy to the point where he went back to try to save his people. For Clark, this is a little bit different because, like I said, I'm not trying to make him to be anything like Jesus or anything like that. But with Clark, at the point that his dad, his own father, he believed that there was a certain time and a point and a purpose behind how Clark, Kal-El, Superman was supposed to be. And it couldn't be too soon, it couldn't be too hasty, it couldn't be too careless. It had to be at a certain time when it was essential. And when you go and look at the tornado scene, which I've talked about this in earlier reviews, which I've seen the movie now 3 times, I think back to it and I think to myself, this man, Jonathan Kent, he, without a shadow of a doubt, loved his son so much and knew that his purpose was so much greater than even his own life, that he allowed himself to be swept up in the tornado without allowing Clark to go. Because Clark could have probably stopped the tornado. He could have started, went and protected his dad, but the time wasn't at that opportune moment. But that was a catalyst that took Clark out of the place where he was so complacent and comfortable to a place, okay, if my dad would die for something like this, then this is real. I can't hide from it. I have to at some point accept it. I have to save people. I have to start helping people. That's why he starts taking these odd jobs and starts doing these different things. And it's so crazy because the more that you listen to the actual score by Hans Zimmer, like this, it even shows in the actual score. Like there's this one song, especially with Flight, it goes through this motion where you're like, okay, he's trying but he can't, he's trying but he can't, but then it's like at some point where you just, even when you're listening to it, you're just going through. And it's just so amazing the way the actual music goes with the rhythm of how the storyline is pacing, but at the same time Clark's journey is going through. And I know I'm making different parallels back and forth, but I just wanted to show y'all these different small things. Going back to even further, I guess the next thing I'll talk about is the fact that, of course, Clark in and of himself in this movie, he's not only like an outsider, he's an alien. I mean, before you looked at Smallville or Lois and Clark, like he had humanistic qualities, he fit in to a degree. This whole movie, for the most part, he had some small good moments, but most of the time he did not fit in, and it showed it so well. And a lot of times when your destiny is far greater than your own, you won't fit in. When you think about, what's a good one? Not Joseph. Yeah, Joseph would be really good. When Joseph was with his brothers and he was marked by God to be a visionary, to be great, and he knew that his destiny was far greater than his own. But unlike Clark, he kind of flaunted it a little bit, and with not using eloquent discernment, that made his brothers envious of him, and he went through this motion where he got put into slavery by his own brothers. And it was like, before that even happened, he was so alienated with his own brothers, where his dad loved him unconditionally, would do everything for him, give up his life for him, whatever. But his brothers just felt like, what is my purpose if we're living through this young thing that obviously doesn't have any real representation of what a real man's supposed to be like? And they just were so jealous of him. But that was how Clark kind of went through this kind of stage with what was around him and his environments. Like, people didn't know, right, like what was really up with him or what was his secret. But they just found ways of just tormenting him and just giving him issues. And you see it through when Clark's young all the way to up when he was older. And each time Clark would never really fold. He would never give in to his anger. He couldn't afford to, because any slip up. And even you think about this on a regular basis as like a Christian, me personally, if I go and somebody spits in my face or they torment me or they go and do this, I can react. I can go and be human and react in a way that is justified accordingly. Physically, mentally, emotionally, but spiritually, that's something that, what is it that God needs for me to do? What is it that I'm trying to gain out of this versus what needs to take place. And so I'm not comparing that necessarily to Smallville or Clark, but with Clark, with this, his dad instilled with him that you cannot afford to let your emotions, your feeling, your thoughts, your process to cloud what is at stake. There's too much at stake for you to hold back, and at the same time for you to go and be so inconsiderate of the environment around you and how fragile everybody around you is. And so if to be a symbol, you are not going to ever be perfect. That's not something that you can do. But at the same time, you have to strive for perfection. You have to strive to do the right thing, no matter if somebody's not doing the right thing by you. Now, there was a point also, and this was interesting because this kind of paralleled Jesus a little bit. It was, let me find, yeah, okay. So there was a point where later on in the story where Clark is fighting, well, not even where he's fighting. He actually gives himself up to General Zod, and him and Lois are on the ship, and they get to a point where Clark's body, he's not able to tolerant of the environment, the Kryptonian environment. Like the body starts shutting down and starts feeling normalized, and he starts coughing up blood. All of a sudden, he passes out, and he goes to this vision kind of state where he's with General Zod, which still don't understand how that even happened, but he gets to a point where he's talking to General Zod about what happened from General Zod's perspective and what can take place if Krypton is resurrected through the relic, and what would be at stake with it. And Clark eventually finds out that this would have to be genocide. That's what Zod wants. He doesn't just want, okay, there to be generations to be rebuilt again. He wants the whole civilization to be wiped out. He doesn't want to have to sit there and rediscover how to actually be a Kryptonian again on Earth. He wants to totally wipe out Earth and wipe out everybody. And even it shows in the way that the imagery of it, the whole scene, it shows how Zod is there with his own suit. Clark initially was just with a regular human suit, and then eventually it shows him with another Superman suit, but the S is like dark. And it's like Clark was kind of debating what to do, and then he realized that he's being tempted because this is something that is not only he cannot do, but he was raised better than that. And he looks upon all the different skulls in the dream or the imagery that was going on. He just starts falling into it. And I think back to in the Bible when Jesus actually went and he got tempted by the enemy. The enemy knew all these different things like, oh, I can give you this or I can give you that. And Jesus kept on denying Satan. And with that, it was like, I was like looking at this and was like, wow, okay, this is really interesting. There was a point where before he got taken to General Zod, he was with an interrogation with Lois. And Lois was telling him, well, what does that stand for? He was like, well, in my homeworld, it stands for hope. And she's like, no, it stands for Superman. She couldn't say it quick enough. But before that had happened, Dr. Hamilton talks to him, and he was telling him about, well, you could be a threat to this. And Clark was like, I've been here for 33 years. I've never been doing this. If anybody knows anything about the walk of Jesus, and when his actual turning point started happening, it was around the age of 33. There's a pivotal. If you go back in the Word, I'm not going to spoil it for you, because I mean the Bible is awesome. I don't know if anybody has ever read it up here, but the story of Jesus, just in and of itself, if you believe it, if you receive it or not, it's an amazing story. It's an amazing story of sacrifice, boldness. Jesus was, to me, classified as the first real superhero. I mean, there's great men in the Bible, but nothing to the gravity of this man. And that's, like I said, this is not comparing the Man of Steel, but with the way that they're actually doing it, it's a very fine line. And even when I went back and I saw it the third time, and they were talking about when Clark went to the church, and he was talking with the priest, and he had a flashback of, I can't remember, it was so many different flashbacks. I think it was him and his dad, and he was getting bullied and he didn't know what to do. But with this specific time frame, he was talking with the priest and he was telling them everything, that he was a Kryptonian, that General Zod was trying to look for him. He didn't know what to do, what he should do, and it was so interesting because I was thinking about the fact that he had said he couldn't trust the Kryptonians, definitely his own people, but at the same time he felt like he couldn't trust the people of Earth. So when Jesus was going and he went and died at Calvary, he even said they know not what they do. And it was like, even though he could have gotten down, he could have gotten angels and leaders, thousands of angels to take care of him and take him off, but he knew that the essence behind what he had to do was still going to be the same. It didn't matter that even though the people that were oppressing him, that were trying to kill him, that were killing him, they definitely couldn't be trusted. But then the people that he were in his own corner, his own disciples, would betray him, they couldn't be trusted either. And that's such an interesting parallel. I'm not sure if anybody caught that, but I'm just going in. I'm going in. This is going to be just a part one. I'm going to have a part two possibly with one of my friends. His name is Shannon. I had a video with him earlier. But this is just good stuff. Trying to think of anything else before I cut out. But it was so many different parallels. Even the final part. Big spoiler. If anybody hasn't seen it, I mean, I've been talking about a lot of stuff right at this point, but there's a point where Clark, Kal-El, and General Zod are fighting, and it's the end, and Zod he's adapted. Like, he's able to fly, he's able to meet the same amount of speed and accuracy as Superman, and Clark finally gets him to a point that he has him. And I've talked about this in other review, but not to this specifics. Clark looks and he goes to a point where he sees that General Zod is not stopping. He's using his laser vision trying to burn this family, this innocent family, for no good reason, and he's doing it purposefully and just to hurt Superman. He knows he can't do anything else. And that's honestly, that's how the enemy is. The enemy, he can only do whispers. He knows that he can't destroy us, but what he tries to do is use the ones that are around us that we love the most to hinder our blessings or bring us down or make us submit or even make us fall. And I'm not saying that necessarily that Superman did fall or that Kal-El did fall, but at the same time it was like there's nothing that he could do, you know. And at that point where it was almost about to he snapped General Zod's neck. But it was like when he went down, you think the fact that all his other Kryptonians are now in the Phantom Zone, the rest of his family is dead. General Zod was the last real blood relative that he would have ever, you know. And of course, people are going to come back. Kara's going to get there, of course, Supergirl and stuff like that. But at that moment and the time in the movie, that made him like in pain. And it was almost like when he went down and he just cried out, it was almost like he was just like so sorry. It's almost like repentance, that he was really kind of repenting for like what he had done, and he didn't want to do it. And it shows that that's why, like, you can't make a sit there and comparison. Okay, they're trying to emulate Jesus. No, Jesus would have laid down his own life before allowing anything of that nature of taking anybody out like that. But it shows the humanistic side of Superman, that at that point when he did that, you see on his face that he would never want to do that again. That he would never take another life like that. And that pushes him into the destiny to finalize him as the Man of Steel. That there's ethics, there's foundations, there's a gravity that's taking place in him to do the right thing continuously. Now, it just really, it was so many different things, and I could keep going on and on and on, but when